The letter arrived on a sunny Tuesday morning. Inside, a $625,000 fine from the HOA for my grandfather's lake house. Pay immediately or lose everything, it demanded. Mrs. Harrington wanted our property for luxury condos. What she didn't know, Grandpa left me the one document that would destroy her plans forever. Before watching full video, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The weathered envelope arrived on Tuesday morning. I stared at the HOA logo stamped in the corner, my coffee growing cold beside me. Inside was a notice that would change everything. Violation notice, $625,000 fine, immediate payment required. My hands trembled as I read the detailed list of violations. The HOA claimed our dock and boathouse violated their architectural harmony guidelines, implemented 5 years ago. They demanded we demolish both structures and pay the accumulated fines, $425 per day for 4 years, or they would place a lien on the property and begin foreclosure proceedings. My grandfather's lake house had been in our family for generations. A simple cabin built in the 1940s, it sat on 3 acres of pristine shoreline that had been our family's summer haven for as long as I could remember. When Grandpa Jim passed last month at 94, he left the property to me, along with a locked wooden chest I hadn't yet opened. I called my sister Emma immediately. $625,000? She gasped. That's insane. The entire property isn't worth much more than that. I know, I said, staring out the window at the boathouse Grandpa had rebuilt after the big storm of '78. It's like they're trying to force us to sell. That's exactly what they're doing, Michael, Emma said. Remember Mrs. Harrington at the funeral? I overheard her talking to some developer about how our plot was the missing piece for their lakefront project. I remembered the woman, tall, silver-haired, with a pearl necklace and a smile that never reached her eyes. She'd offered condolences that sounded rehearsed while eyeing the property like a vulture. I called the HOA president, Mrs. Victoria Harrington, immediately. I'm sorry about your grandfather, she said, not sounding sorry at all. Her voice was cold and practiced over the phone. But rules are rules. That eyesore has violated our standards for years. Your grandfather refused to comply, and now the bill comes due. These structures have been here for decades, I argued, trying to keep my voice steady. They were built long before your HOA even existed. The previous board may have been lenient, she replied. But I was elected to enforce standards and protect property values. You have 30 days to pay or we proceed with legal action. I should mention that we've had several interested buyers who would take the property as is and handle the violations themselves. Her voice took on a honeyed tone. I'd be happy to introduce you. It would save you quite a headache. I ended the call, seething. The amount was impossible for me to pay. I'd have to sell the lake house, exactly what I suspected Mrs. Harrington wanted. The lake house sat on the most beautiful curve of the shoreline. I'd overheard her at Grandpa's funeral telling someone it was wasted on sentimentality when it could be developed into luxury condos. That evening I sat on the dock, watching the sunset turn the lake to liquid gold. This place had been the backdrop of my childhood, fishing with Grandpa, summer swims, campfires, and family gatherings. How could I let it go? Inside the cabin, everything reminded me of him. His old fishing rod still stood in the corner. His collection of hand-tied flies sat in the small glass case by the window. His worn armchair faced the lake, positioned to catch the morning sun. In the bedroom, the wooden chest sat at the foot of the bed. I'd been avoiding opening it as if doing so would somehow finalize his death. But now I needed any help I could get. The brass key turned with a satisfying click. Inside, the chest smelled of cedar and thyme. On top lay Grandpa's old fishing journal, recording every catch for 50 years. Beneath it were photographs. Grandpa as a young man building the dock, my father as a boy holding up a prize base, me and Emma swimming off the boathouse roof. Deeper in the chest, I found a leather folder containing Grandpa's military medals from Korea, letters from my grandmother during their courtship, and at the very bottom, a yellowed envelope marked "Property Papers Important," in his careful handwriting. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside I found the original deed from 1943, handwritten boundary descriptions, and a startling document, a land covenant from when the lake community was first established. It specifically granted our property perpetual shoreline rights, including maintenance of private dock and boathouse for family use. But most importantly, I discovered something Mrs. Harrington clearly didn't know. Our property was never legally part of the HOA. When the association formed in the 1980s, surrounding lots were included, but our deed contained a specific exemption. Grandpa had simply paid their dues as a courtesy to support neighborhood improvements. The next morning, I drove into town to visit Richard Taylor, Grandpa's old attorney who was now in his 70s. His office was above the hardware store, up a narrow staircase that creaked with each step. "Michael Wilson," he smiled, rising from behind a desk stacked with papers. "You look just like your grandfather when he was your age. You remember me?" "Of course. Jim brought you fishing with us when you were, what, 10? You caught that monster catfish and wouldn't stop talking about it." His eyes twinkled behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I've been expecting you." "You have?" Richard nodded. "Jim told me you'd be coming. He knew Harrington would make her move when he passed. She's been after that property for years." "Why didn't he tell me?" "Your grandfather believed in handling things the right way. He wanted you to discover the truth yourself and make your own decision. He was old school that way." Richard gestured to a chair. "Show me what you found." I laid out the documents on his desk. Richard examined each one carefully, nodding slowly. "These are exactly what we need. Mrs. Harrington has overstepped badly. Not only does your property have explicit exemptions, but the HOA has no jurisdiction over your land. So the fine is invalid?" "Invalid? It's preposterous. It's borderline fraudulent." Richard leaned back. "Jim and I discussed this possibility. He refused to sell to Harrington's developer friends, so we anticipated they might try something like this. Together we prepared our response. Rather than just defending ourselves, Richard suggested we go on the offensive. Victoria Harrington has made enemies throughout the community with her heavy-handed approach," he explained. "She's used the HOA as her personal fiefdom, prioritizing her developer connections over the community's character. It's time someone stood up to her." Over the next week I spoke with neighbors. Many shared stories about Grandpa, how he'd helped during storms, taught neighborhood kids to fish, and quietly supported community projects despite not being part of the HOA. I also heard complaints about Mrs. Harrington's regime, unreasonable fines, selective enforcement, and rumors of kickbacks from preferred contractors. The HOA meeting was held in the community center the following Tuesday evening. The room was packed, word had spread about our situation, and neighbors had turned out in unprecedented numbers. Mrs. Harrington was at the podium reviewing violation notices when I walked in with Richard. "Mrs. Harrington," Richard spoke loudly, interrupting her mid-sentence. "Before you continue, we need to address an urgent matter regarding illegal fines imposed on the Wilson property." The room fell silent. Mrs. Harrington's face reddened. "This is not on the agenda. You'll need to wait." "I'm afraid this can't wait," I said, stepping forward. "You've issued fines totaling $625,000 against my property without legal authority to do so." I laid out everything: the original deed, the exemption from HOA jurisdiction, and the perpetual shoreline rights. Richard distributed copies of the documents to board members. "Furthermore," Richard added, "issuing fraudulent fines could constitute attempted property theft under state law. We're prepared to file a complaint with the district attorney's office and pursue civil action for harassment if this matter isn't resolved immediately." The other board members looked stunned. One whispered urgently to Mrs. Harrington, who appeared to be struggling for words. "This is irregular," she finally managed. "These documents will need to be verified by our attorneys." An elderly man in the back stood up. It was Mr. Peterson, who had lived across the cove for 60 years. "I was on the original board when the HOA formed. What they're saying is true. The Wilson property was never included. We always respected Jim's independence." Another resident stood. "I'd like to know why we're spending HOA resources trying to find a property that isn't even under our jurisdiction. What else haven't you told us, Victoria?" Mrs. Harrington tried to adjourn the meeting, but the board voted to continue. By the end of the night, they had officially acknowledged our exemption and rescinded all fines. A motion was also passed to audit all HOA finances and enforcement actions for the past 5 years. As we left the meeting, neighbors came up to congratulate me. Mrs. Peterson hugged me, tears in her eyes. "Your grandfather would be so proud. He loved that lake house more than anything." "Except his family," I said, smiling. "Well, yes," she agreed. "The lake house was for the family. That's what Victoria never understood. It wasn't about the property, it was about the memories made there." The next day, I received a hand-delivered letter from Mrs. Harrington. It was a terse apology citing a misunderstanding of property boundaries, and confirming that all actions against our property had been withdrawn. At the bottom was a handwritten note: "I'm prepared to offer $1.2 million for the property if you reconsider selling." I tore the letter in half and tossed it in the recycling. Over the next few weeks, more revelations emerged about Mrs. Harrington's conduct. The audit revealed she had received consulting fees from the development company interested in our property. She had also selectively enforced rules against homeowners who opposed her initiatives while ignoring violations by her supporters. Mrs. Harrington resigned her position the following month amid calls for her removal. The new board, led by Mrs. Peterson's son Thomas, adopted a more community-focused approach and formally recognized the historic status of several properties, including our lake house. 2 weeks later, I hosted a lakeside barbecue inviting all the neighbors. The boathouse and dock were decorated with strings of lights, and I fired up Grandpa's old grill for the first time since his passing. Emma flew in from Chicago, bringing her husband and kids who immediately raced to the water. As twilight settled over the lake, I found myself standing on the dock with Thomas Peterson. Mrs. Harrington put her house up for sale, he mentioned. Moving to a condo in the city, apparently. Guess lakefront living wasn't really her style after all, I said. It's more than that, Thomas said quietly. This lake has a way of knowing who belongs and who doesn't. Your grandfather understood that. He was a guardian of sorts, keeping the spirit of this place alive. I nodded, watching the children splash in the shallows, their laughter carrying across the water. We're establishing a conservation easement for the shoreline, Thomas continued. Would you consider including your property? It would ensure it stays natural in perpetuity. I think Grandpa would have wanted that, I said. He always said we don't really own the land, we're just taking care of it for future generations. The following weekend I reopened the wooden chest. This time, instead of just taking documents out, I began adding to it. Photographs from the barbecue, notes from neighbors sharing memories of Grandpa, and a copy of the conservation easement protecting the shoreline forever. At the bottom of the chest I found a sealed envelope I'd missed before. It was addressed simply, to my successor. Inside was a letter from Grandpa written in his shaky hand. If you're reading this, you've already fought your first battle for this place and hopefully won. This land has been a blessing to our family, but blessings must be protected. The deed gives you ownership, but it's the love for this shoreline, the respect for its waters, and the memories made here that create a true legacy. Buildings can be replaced, but the spirit of a place, once lost, is gone forever. Guard it well, not just for our family but for all who find peace in these waters. As the sun set over the lake, I sat on the dock Grandpa had built with his own hands. The wooden chest now held not just his memories, but the documents that had saved our family legacy, and the promise of more memories to come. In the distance, I could see construction equipment being removed from the lot Mrs. Harrington had sold to the developers. The new owners had decided to renovate the existing cottage instead of building condos. Somehow the lake had worked its magic again. Mrs. Harrington's dream of luxury condominiums lining the shore had died with her resignation. Instead, the community was rallying around a new vision, one that honored the lake's history while protecting its future. And at the heart of it all was Grandpa's lake house, standing as it always had, a testament to one man's love for a piece of shoreline, and the family who would continue his legacy. I couldn't help but smile, thinking of Grandpa's foresight. He could have told me about the documents, but he wanted me to fight for what mattered. In the end, the lake house remained as he'd always intended, a place of memories, not mansions. A true legacy that would continue for generations to come.